begin, and then start when ready, sir.
All right. Oh, right. I should probably hold on.
Yeah.
Just posture here. God damn it. Need to get the water bottle out of shot so that way it doesn't look like my fucking room's a mess.
The setup on your lap is also teetering. You know,
it's not even on my lap.
I'm just feeling shitstone.
All right. Okay. All right. Where was it? Oh yeah. Hello, people.
Hold on. Where was I? And you hadn't even started yet.
Keep that part in.
Oh my god.
All right. Hello, people of YouTube land. Those that are part of the Cringe Crew Gaming community Discord, and those that follow Ted and I on Twitch, and those that are listening to this on whatever audio streaming service this is on. I'm Traductus.
And I'm Ted.
And this is the Cringe Crew Gaming movie review podcast where we take a director and go through his entire filmography and we review them. At least that's the theme that we are going so far. That theme might change whenever we feel like it.
True.
That being said, as per usual, I know people probably gonna get sick of me of saying this. We are doing the Christopher Nolan movies, and this is kind of like a reverse of the James Bond podcast. Instead of me being the extreme fanboy, Ted is the extreme fanboy, and I am the filthy casual, as opposed to Ted being the filthy casual. And here's another movie that I haven't seen before, and that is Dunkirk. That being said, Dunkirk was released in 2017, and before I get way into this, I am sticking to formula, right? It's been a long day.
Yeah.
I'm kind of out of it.
Yeah, you're good for now. I think we're still there.
Okay. Obviously directed by Christopher Nolan. Oh my god. Alright, cinematography, Hoyt van Hoytema. Not as funny as Harry Fister, but it's nice to know that we have a first name and a last name being slightly the same. Released on the 13th of July at Odeon Leicester Square?
What? I feel like it's Leicester.
Out of the West End of London.
I think it's Leicester. I think it's Leicester.
Leicester Square. Okay, thank you. There's
a lot of letters there, but I think what you're trying to say is Leicester.
Yeah. Leicester.
Yeah,
okay.
pretty sure. Yep.
Okay. And 19th of July 2017 in France. The 20th of July 2017 in the Netherlands. And then for the rest of the UK and the US, it was July 21st. With a budget of 800. Sorry, not 800. God damn it. Sorry. 82.5 to 150 million. And with the box office return of 527 million.
Not awful. I mean, it's a downturn from the last one, but like still profitable.
Yeah. For the cast, we have Fionn Whitehead as Tommy Jensen. He also has I believe the lead role in Black Mirror's Bandersnatch.
You know what? Now that you say so, that sounds right.
We also have Tommy Glynn Carney, who has a plays Aegon Is that ill Targaryen or two Targaryen?
I genuinely I don't know. This was not a movie
from-
where you stick with character names.
Yeah. He's in House of the Dragon. So like the Game of Thrones prequel. And then there's also like I guess he's in Tolkien, The King, and Ratio. Oh, that's one whole movie. Okay, in 2019, never seen that. So, Jack Loudon as Collins, which Ford is 2. Okay, whatever. Harry Styles as Alex, which, I mean, Harry Styles, One Direction, right?
Yep.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Well, on top of solo stuff now, like I think originally One Direction. Yeah.
Yeah. We also have Aaron Bernard as Gibson. He's known for playing Davy in Hunky Dory, Claude in The Truth About Emmanuel, Bobby Willis and Scylla, Tim in 13, Richard III in The White Queen, and Wesley Gibson in Dunkirk. There's a lot of people that I don't recognize, but there's people that I recognize in this. That's kind of like the weird thing. And yes, there are there are
recycled characters. Yeah, I want does God, what's it like? Alfred, does he get credited?
No, he is the Fortis leader and he is uncredited.
Okay, because you don't see him in this film, but you definitely hear his voice, and it's obviously unmistakable enough that like it's him. And then I don't know if that was on your list, but Cillian Murphy also gets recycled. I don't know his name in the movie, but also
Cillian Murphy is a Shivering Soldier.
Okay, unnamed credit, perfect. Well, silence is great for podcasts.
Sorry. Somebody fucking messaged me. Got distracted.
This might be the most scuffed it's ever fucking been.
Well, we're not gonna have a lot to talk about, so we might as well kill time somehow.
Kill it with fucking silence, alright.
James Darcy as Colonel Winnett. He's in the he plays Howard Stark's butler Edwin Jarvis in the Marvel Cinematic Universe television series Agent Carter, and the 2019 film Avengers Endgame. We have Barry Keoghan as George Mills. What the hell has he been in? Okay, American Animals, Calm with Horses, The Green Knight, Trespass Against Us, 71, Mammal. Apparently, he made it to number 27 on the list of Ireland's greatest film actors. Kenneth Branagh, someone who I actually fucking recognize. Commander Bolton. Good old Kenneth Branagh. I recommend watching his version of Hamlet. Let's see. Mark Reliance as Mr. Dawson. Oh wait, never mind. Now I know. Okay, now I know who Barry Keoghan's character is in this movie. Okay. All right. Mark Reliance is Mr. Dawson. I guess he plays. I think he plays the giant in the BFG.
Okay.
I'm not totally sure. Tom Hardy as Farrier, Ford is number 1.
I forgot about Tom Hardy.
Which Tom Hardy, like, we don't really have to. So we already went over.
Just unnecessary badass, dude.
It's
still.
Yeah. Elliot Tittenser as Highlander 2, and Will Attenborough as Second Lieutenant. Don't know who either of those are.
Will Attenborough sounds familiar, but I don't know that I could place him in another role.
So first role's Photograph 51. Oh, Photograph 51, Our Girl, Dunkirk, and The Outpost.
I don't know. I don't know that it just sounds like a really familiar name.
Oh, his grandfather's Richard Attenborough.
That would help.
What?
I said that would probably help.
Yeah. uh, for those who don't know who Richard Attenborough is, I'm pretty sure he's the owner of Jurassic Park in the movie Jurassic Park.
That sounds right, but it's been a long ass time since
Yeah,
I've seen it.
I can't remember the guy's name. But yeah. But anyway, as for background, after we got done with cast here, thank God that was a we rarely go through the whole cast, but but the thing is that there's a small cast, like everybody in this cast like are the only characters that are of importance in this, and each of them have like an equal amount of importance. So that's the whole reason why I went through the entire cast.
Yeah, everybody's got their, albeit however brief, they're all of their moments in the sun. It would be very hard to skip over any of them, like with the way the movie plays out. So,
yeah, to be honest, the only person that literally has the typical Christopher Nolan, why is this big name actor in a cameo role is Michael Caine.
right, it doesn't even get credited because you never see his face, and like even though he's unnamed, even Cillian Murphy's character is important to one of the pieces of the plot.
Right. But anyway, director Christopher Nolan conceived this film in the mid-90s when he and his future wife Emma Thomas sailed across the English Channel, following the path of many small boats in the Dunkirk evacuation. Nolan considered having the entire film be improvised instead of writing a script, but luckily Emma Thomas convinced him otherwise, because I don't know how the hell they'd be able to do this improvised.
I mean, I guess if you like, we'll get to it a little bit as we cover plot, but I mean, I guess that if you like cover the major events, right? Like, as long as the things are happening, I guess you wouldn't need to. There wasn't a ton of dialogue in this movie to begin with that was all that important. Like,
right.
You probably could have pulled it off, but I think it would have lowered the quality.
Right. Nolan said that he wanted to structure the film at the point of view of the characters and intended to use visuals rather than dialogue and backstory, which checks out quite a bit.
Yep.
And wanted to incorporate throughout the film what he calls his snowballing effect.
Yeah, and I think that's solid too. I mean, all of the plots kind of roll into one bigger focus at the end, so that checks out too.
Now he postponed Dunkirk until he acquired sufficient experience directing large-scale action films, and wanted to convey the perspective of the soldiers on the beach, for whom contact with the enemy was extremely limited and intermittent. He did not show Germans on screen, and he also omitted scenes with Winston Churchill and generals in war rooms, since he did not want to get bogged down in the politics of the situation.
And honestly, like, smart for the times too. I mean, I don't know that 27 was the ultimate height of, the world turns on Churchill, but I know that if you follow certain political circles, that like, hey, Churchill wasn't a good guy either. So I think it was smart to keep, both Nazi images and Churchill off the screen for a World War II movie.
He said that there was he showed key members of the crew 11 films that had inspired him on this, which one including what I think is arguably the greatest war movie of all time, All Quiet on the Western Front, Wages of Fear, Alien, which is weird, Speed, which is another weird one, Unstoppable, what? 1924 film Greed, 1927 film Sunrise, the 1970 film Ryan's Daughter, Battle of Algiers, Chariots of Fire, and Foreign Correspondent. Only two of which are war films. That is weird.
I mean, I feel like of the movies that I recognize there, be them war or otherwise, that like you say it and it kind of makes sense where its influence comes in, but it is strange that
that does make sense, especially with like Speed, because like there are, and also Alien, because there are parts of those films where it gets uh,
D-
where it gets very, very tense. So
tense, but also like for Alien specifically, it's kind of like unknown enemy, right? That like you don't know what you're up against until you're fighting it, and like I can see the influence, even if I think they're still weird.
And with that being said, I think that would be enough. They had a historical correspondent being author Joshua Levine, who also wrote a book adaptation, Dunkirk, the history behind the major motion picture. And Levine accompanied Nolan while interviewing veterans, although all the people that are in this are, for what I understand, fictional.
Yeah. So to get into the plot, essentially, it's an adaptation of a historical event. Basically, they were trying to evacuate soldiers back to England from Dunkirk, and part of that war agreement, I don't remember. I'm not a war historian, but essentially they were using passenger ships, like private boats, in lieu of military craft, not only to keep people safe because you can't attack civilians, but also because certain channels and access to government resources were blocked. What this movie does then is takes the perspective of, I think it's 4 different groups.
Yes.
4 sounds right. And essentially like brings all of their stories in bits and pieces to where they converge for different perspectives of the same event.
That being said, the 4 groups are the British soldiers that are on the beach that are trying to get back home, the civilians that are heading to Dunkirk to bring the soldiers home, the commanding officers trying to arrange the whole thing, and fighter pilots that are trying to protect the civilian boats and the military boats and everything else from German bombers in order to get everybody out of Dunkirk and back to England.
Yeah. Lots of different like I said, lots of different perspectives that all just kind of converge all on the same point. There's not a whole lot of I guess saying there's not a lot of narrative isn't quite correct, because everybody's got their own narrative, but it's not just like one big overarching story. It's mostly like a converging anthology of different tales from Dunkirk. But like you said, each one individually being fictional, but dramatized for a movie adaptation.
And this movie is a little bit out of order. Like there's 3 things. It's basically you got the 4 things that are happening at different times, with each of them catching up with one another until at the near the end.
They do
basically everything catches up with each other.
Yeah, they do eventually converge all on the same point, but sometimes the bits and pieces are still that non-linear storytelling that Christopher Nolan adores so much. And
I guess with that, likes and dislikes.
Sure. I think this one will be pretty short and sweet from me. So the big takeaway from this was cinematography and imagery. Like you mentioned earlier, this is a super intense movie. The sounds are really great. Everything sounds super flush, super thorough. I feel like if you closed your eyes, you might feel like you were there. Like. I mean, the explosives, the weaponry, the planes, the boats, like everything sounded like it was supposed to, within normal limits to watch a movie. The imagery was really good. I mean, they really, even when not a whole lot was happening, or like before you recognized that it was an anthology, I mean, it still felt intense. You still felt invested. Like I said earlier, even if you didn't,
especially right off the back, when like Fionn Whitehead's character's just trying to take a crap throughout the beginning of the thing, and then like people are just getting shot at.
Yeah, no, I mean, even the opening scene of the movie is they're like the two boys are trying to carry a body onto the ship to bring it back to England around all of the soldiers, like through gunfire and bombs dropping and all of this stuff. You know, you really even if you don't recognize like the names of the characters by the end of the movie, like they're not using dialogue to establish it. They're not verbally telling you why things are important. It's just you recognize the perils of war and get invested in everyone's safety.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the cool thing I really like about this is that there isn't really like background or like character development per se, but like you still care about the characters just because like since like I guess they're like the people that you're kind of following throughout the entire thing, but on top of that, like you're very sympathetic to everybody's plight, you know?
Yeah.
And actually care about like, you know, what happens to like certain people. Like it's not like shall we say like a slasher film where it's just you have like a bunch of like, you know, teenagers that you don't really care about and you're just like, oh, let's see what cool way like they ended up, you know, getting bumped off. Like you don't really care if they do or not. There's nothing really that tense.
Yeah.
At least in and I wouldn't say bad slasher films, but like the stereotypical slasher film. But in this movie, despite no real background and no real character development per se, with the exception of like several like actions that are like very, very brave actions that are done.
I also think too, I mean, we had a discussion before we watched the movie that like we had discussions about the merits of war movies, right? That like this one falls into a different class than say like Saving Private Ryan, right? Which has war visuals in it, but it's not necessarily a war movie in the sense that you're seeing all the perils of war. In that movie, you care about the narrative, and in this one, like you're invested because it's war.
But the perils of because it's a war, there's people that you don't know that are thrown into it, but like you still like sympathize with their plight with like everything that's going on.
And the realism of it. Like, you know, when we watched Interstellar, I talked about like the big, broad, overarching like triumph of humanity kinds of stories. And you get the same kind of feel for this one, but I think it's more relatable whether you've been to war or not, like specifically because it's something that we see, you know, I don't want to say every day, like I'm a privileged dude in the U.S. who's never, you know, seen war in his own land. You know what I mean? But like in that sense that you know war is happening. You know that these struggles are very real for lots of people all the time. And I think that just makes this one easier to grip without the backbone of a narrative.
Right. And honestly, it's a very. I'm trying to think of other movies that I've seen that actually do that. Like, and I can't really think of like any that are besides like maybe like movies that are like complete reenactments, you know, but even then they have like some sort of like character work.
Yeah, they give you some sort of story. I think this is a really unique movie in that like they're not like the backbone, the storyline is the real event, but they're just kind of giving you like the plights from within, not the whole thing. And I think that really sets this one apart from other things. I think that you can find bits and pieces of other movies where they do that without necessarily like making it the whole movie. I have to give Nolan credit that he was able to put that together. I mean, like we complain all the time that like, oh, everything's a remake. There's no original ideas in Hollywood anymore. But like, this is pretty standalone. There aren't a whole lot of examples like it.
I mean, the closest thing I could say is like maybe some like Buster Keaton silent films, which were that, you know, obviously because Keaton understood you know, the limitations of silent films, so therefore instead of like having a narrative that was dialogue heavy where you would see like the title cards and everything, he would try to like tell the story through action. And with this film, the story is mainly told through action.
I also have to say that like I know we've recycled actors again, right? I get it. But in this one it doesn't feel like
it's not egregious at all.
No, and even like, I remember seeing the ads for this movie when it came out, and it was Harry Styles, and you're like, oh, it's a recognizable face. Why would they put him in this movie? Or just trying to sell tickets, kind of thing, right? But like, it genuinely, like,
he does well. He does pretty damn good.
He does well, but in the grand scheme of things, like, it doesn't matter, right? They could all be fucking Christian Bale, and I don't think it would change this movie in the slightest. Because the necessity wasn't to act, the necessity wasn't develop or build a character. It wasn't make things believable. It was get thrown into war. Good luck.
Yeah.
Cillian Murphy. I mean, I think the only place that, like, even with Tom Hardy's character, right? He's one of the fighter pilots. He's in a mask the whole time. We questioned for probably the first 8 times we saw him if it was actually Tom Hardy, because like the actor didn't matter. We were
arguing with each other. Yeah. I'm like, it's Tom Hardy. You're like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
Not was it? I'm like, no. The other person's not Tom Hardy. This person is Tom Hardy. You're like,
but that's just it. Is that it didn't matter that it was Harry Styles or Tom Hardy or Cillian Murphy or
right.
anybody in it. It didn't matter. You were invested because it was like. It felt new. It felt fresh. It felt like I wasn't invested in this person that I recognize. And you get the impression that at any given moment, any one of them could die. And like,
yes.
And I think that makes this super relevant because it added to that suspenseful feeling through the movie. It really drove the point home that we're not following characters. We're not building a story. We're following war.
And on top of that, the hell was I going to? Do you have any more positives? Because I mean, I have like a positive. Okay.
So
I'm not gonna transition with what I was gonna say yet, but I'm not sure.
I think
I know exactly what I was gonna say, but I'm not sure if I should say it.
I got you. I'll hit you, then I'll let you transition. So
yeah,
I think the other really neat thing about this one is that again, Christopher Nolan is taking outside help to make the best movie possible. It wasn't necessarily as significant to me for Interstellar. Like, I think it was important to how that movie played through, but in this one, like, without doing specific stories about actual real people in the war, they used a historian to make sure that it was cohesive. It fit what actually happened in the story, and I think that's really neat. I think that it shows that his flexibility to take what is real and adjust it to what he's trying to do with it. He's not trying to create his own story or bend rules. He's trying to do the best he can in the form fit, and I respect that a lot.
Yeah, which makes like a movie like this like a hell of a lot better than, shall we say, like Pearl Harbor.
Exactly though. Pearl Harbor is like, again, Pearl Harbor happened, but that's the only real thing we're using. Everything else can be fictionalized and doing it ourselves. And right. This fit itself to a mold and still did really well creatively. I'll let you have at it now. I'm out of likes, so you do your thing.
All right. So here's a thing that, okay, this is a thing that I would say is I lean towards more positive. Ted might lean towards it a little bit more negative. And that is the non-linear storytelling on this. I would say that the non-linear storytelling has a couple positives. One of them being that you see all the characters, like the 4 groups of people, roughly kind of at the same time. And if you try to cut this movie linearly, you'll probably forget about like a couple people. Like, honestly, if this was linear, you'd probably forget about like the civilians on the boats for like the longest freaking time. You know?
I think there are some places where it's avoidable.
Right.
I think that you could tell the story differently with the same shots and make it make sense. I will agree with you to an extent that I don't think it makes this unwatchable or confusing or difficult. Like, I don't think it provides any of those elements that we've struggled with in previous movies.
Right.
But I will say that, like, it didn't necessarily need to happen.
Right. But I also say it also kind of disorients you a little bit and does add a little bit of mystery on a couple of things. Because, like,
So for the one example,
Whitehead's character, and I'm just gonna call the other person Bernard. Yeah, Bernard's character by his actual character name Gibson, because that's the only name that I remember in this entire movie. The fact that there's very little dialogue, and you see like all like different things happening all at the same time, and then when finally it's the officers, and then Gibson and Whitehead character cross paths with the officers, and they're like listening in on the officers like talking and stuff. And by the way, they haven't spoken a word of dialogue, the two soldiers, so you kind of question, it's like, well, are they British soldiers? Are they French soldiers, like disguised as British soldiers trying to get back? Or are these, German spies trying to like, there's a lot of like cool things that are done that you with the non-linear storytelling, and then when everything kind of comes together, you're just kind of wondering like, all right, it now this has crisscrossed, how's it gonna pan out?
I guess like I hear you. The big egregious examples to me are after Cillian Murphy gets rescued by the civilian boat, right? That like they wait 20 minutes after you see him be a cold shivering refugee, right? That then they go back and he's escaping the ship that the two soldiers are getting on, right? That like, okay, well it's just, you could have done that differently and it would have made sense. The other one is the scene, so you see it once, there's two fighters remaining after a dogfight. One of the fighters goes down, lands in the water. You can tell that he lands in front of a civilian ship. Obviously the same civilian ship carrying Cillian Murphy, because, again, converging plots. You go 20 minutes back to the soldiers, and then you come back to the civilians on the boat rescuing the guy from the plane. You watch the same plane go down twice, 20 minutes apart from each other in the movie. And I think that, like, while it doesn't make it confusing. You never question, like, right, oh, did they add another fighter pilot that went down? Like, it also just kind of, you could, in fact, tell this story once and have it make sense in a linear fashion. I don't think it was bad. I'm not here to complain about it or say that it was a negative, but I don't think it was necessary.
Yeah, I mean, I agree too. But like, I'm just saying there are positives to it, and it also made the movie a little bit interesting and different. But it was, fairly like not needed.
Yeah,
I do agree on that. I'm just saying that it wasn't like a detriment to the movie.
It wasn't Memento where you spent 3/4 of the movie confused. Right.
Anything you need to add?
Yeah. So the only real negative I have that I feel is worth mentioning. Early on in the movie, it can be very easy to tune yourself out of it. And the only reason I say that is because there isn't an established plot. They're not making you concerned about different characters, right? Like, the first scene definitely sets up at least 2 or 3 of the plots. Like, it gives you a baseline, but it never hooks you because there isn't a narrative. Again, I think that's a positive for the overall feel of the movie, but I will say that very early on in the movie, it feels like it lacks context. It's easy to check out, despite it being better for the overall. And I just think that it would go hard to
pick up. Like, as soon as
absolutely.
Like the movie does pick up, and it like because there is that one part from like the beginning shot to when it starts picking up again.
So one of the plot lines is the civilian ship. One of the kids who's just supposed to be helping load the boat and kick the boat out to sea ends up getting on the boat because he wants to be a part of something. He wants to make the newspaper for his dad, right? And like, obviously it's significant, and it becomes one of the plot points is to follow this civilian ship. But at the beginning, it doesn't like, well, who is this kid? Why is it important that he's going?
Right.
And also, like, why do you have to be invested in him? Or why does this civilian ship matter when these soldiers are here versus these pilots versus, like, it's a difficult place to jump in if you don't know what kind of movie you're getting into.
And I fully agree. I fully agree. Like it it's better for the entire film as a whole, but at the same time, like you could picture somebody just like flipping through like TV channels or maybe like watching it like on a live, on from like a streaming service, and then just going like probably just checking out and then not giving like the entire movie like a chance.
Similarly, like, I don't know that you could go into this movie without knowing what it's about. I think it would be very difficult for somebody to just be like, hey, come watch Dunkirk, and you just be like, okay, why? Like, I feel like you have to care a little bit about the historical events or be interested in war movies or can appreciate the filmmaking enough to make this movie worth watching. Like, I don't think this is like a Batman, for example, where you can jump in, not know much about it, not have a background, just say, oh, Batman's coming to theaters, let's go. Dunkirk is not the same way.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
You got anything else for your list, or you want to get into rankings?
I don't really like, honestly, like rankings, because like my negatives were literally just there's only like 2 negatives, and none of them really are like that bad at all. Like there's
Fair enough. All right. So Stahlman talked to me before the podcast, and he said that I was probably going to be agitated based on where he put it, and I've spent this entire time recording figuring out where the hell I'm going to be mad at him for it. So I'm going to start, and I'm struggling here because I can't decide whether it goes above or below Batman Begins. I think I'm going to put it behind Batman Begins, putting it in 6th, between Batman Begins and Interstellar. I think this did what Interstellar wanted to do from a much more approachable scale. I think the novelty of this movie was really good. Obviously, it needs its credit. But I think that Batman Begins was just like a more approachable movie, that it appeals to wider audiences, that it doesn't require the legwork or anything that makes this movie what it is. I don't think it requires the same level of investment to jump into it. I think Dunkirk is really good, and I feel really terrible putting it 6th for how good it was, but I think it belongs behind Batman Begins.
all right. And now here's where I might anger Ted. I don't know if I'm putting it above or below following.
Really? That high?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It also helps that I'm a huge history buff, so I like historical, films, especially war films. I also really, really like the unique way of actually doing a World War II film, because every World War II film that I basically see are pretty much all the goddamn same.
It's hard to disagree.
And just seeing something unique like this, because I was honestly thinking that I was probably going to see something that's like, Saving Private Ryan, but Christopher Nolan version, or Sansa Hiyo Jima, but Christopher Nolan version.
That's a fair expectation. I would understand you going in that way.
I wasn't expecting and the funny thing is that a big thing that, and Ted and I kind of were discussing this beforehand, moral dilemmas. Like how I said, like, well, you don't really get that in a lot of World War II movies, because it's usually, Allies good, Axis bad,
Yep.
And it's kind of hard, and for most people, that's something that you can't necessarily argue, because generally most people with a brain will say that the Axis were bad,
Right. I think this movie brought a different set of conflicts, and you never felt like, hey, we have to fight the enemy. I shouldn't say never. It was very rare. Like, even when there was the dogfighting, you felt like it was protecting people, not fighting the other side. Like
Right.
it did a really good job at creating internal conflicts in the war situation, not, you know, one power versus another. So yeah,
Exactly. And that's, I think, is the strongest thing about this. That's why I like All Quiet on the Western Front. Because it has that internal conflict. Like in this, you have like the one kid gets injured, and there's like another kid there that, you know, he's conflicted between himself. Like, does he, you know, retaliate against Cillian Murphy's character, or does he, you know, like try to calm him down because he understands that he's not in his right mind because he's shell shocked. Also, like that scene where like the boat has like holes in it and it's sinking, and they're hoping that it's gonna float, but they're not. They think there's too much weight, so they're trying to see like who the hell are we throwing off first to get it up there. And it's like scenes like that I don't normally see in a World War II movie. And even with like the non-linear editing on their not being necessary, it was kind of neat to see in a World War II movie. So I'm gonna put it below Following, just because like I think Following's story is a little bit, you know, better, but I love how different Dunkirk is, and that's why I have it that high.
I respect that choice. It's I will say that it's not my kind of movie. Like I do prefer a narrative, especially the way that I know Christopher Nolan can write. But I don't have any judgment for that choice. Like I mean I'm happy that you enjoyed it, especially if you went in just expecting Saving Private Ryan 2.
Oh, I totally did. I was literally thinking like this entire podcast is going to be like, well, it's like, yeah, it's a good movie, but it's no All Quiet on the Western Front, you know. And that is a point. It's not All Quiet on the Western Front, but like, as for like war movies, it's up there.
Absolutely,
it's pretty up there for me.
Absolutely. All right. So I think that wraps us up for this week. I will say that the podcast plans to continue. May take a short break, may not. Who knows at this point? I don't even. That would require thinking ahead. However, next week's will be the tentative last one for Christopher Nolan. Tenet is the last one currently released. Oppenheimer comes out in July, but this podcast is way too far in advance to wait until July and still have them be posting once a week. So,
so we're gonna try to.
I was gonna say we're gonna pick something else up so that the podcast continues. We will eventually review Oppenheimer once we've got access to it, but for the time being, this will be it for Christopher Nolan. We will still be watching movies of some variation in the Discord on Tuesdays. Usually on Tuesdays. We've shifted around quite a bit this podcast just for, accessibility for everybody to be able to watch and all that fun stuff. But you can hop in on Tuesdays and watch with us. If you have requests, suggestions, whatever for the future one, I think we have a direction that we're leaning just based on length before we get to some cool stuff around Halloween. But, yeah, if you got other request suggestions, obviously we can bring this back in the future, do it again. Love to know what you guys would want to see. Beyond that, I think that wraps us up, and we will catch you here next week.
Exactly.
All right. As always, please hop in the Discord. Come hang out with the guys. Watch some streams, watch some movies. You can catch us both on Twitch. Stahlman at Traductus, myself at Ted Green Eagles, and we'll see you next time.
Yep. See ya.